Structure is a selection of events from the character's life stories that is composed into a strategic sequence to arouse specific emotions and to express a specific view of life. An event is caused by or affects people, thus delineating characters. It takes place in a setting, generating image, action, and dialogue. It draws energy from conflict, producing emotion in characters and audience alike. But event choices cannot be displayed randomly or indifferently. They must be composed, and to compose in story means much the same thing it does in music. What to include? To exclude? To put before and after what? To answer these questions, you must know your purpose. Events composed to do what? One purpose may be to express your feelings, but this becomes self-indulgence if it doesn't result in arousing emotions in the audience. A second purpose may be to express ideas, but this risks solipsism if the audience cannot follow. So the design of events needs a dual strategy. Event means change. If the streets outside your window are dry, but after a nap you see they're wet, you assume an event has taken place, called rain. The world's changed from dry to wet. You cannot, however, build a film out of nothing but changes in weather, although there are those who have tried. Story events are meaningful, not trivial. To make change meaningful, it must, to begin with, happen to a character. If you see someone drenched in a downpour, this has somewhat more meaning than a damp street. A story event creates meaningful change in the life situation of a character that is expressed and experienced in terms of a value. To make change meaningful, you must express it, and the audience must react to it in terms of a value. Values are the soul of storytelling. Ultimately, ours is the art of expressing to the world a perception of values. Story values are the universal qualities of human experience that may shift from positive to negative or negative to positive from one moment to the next. For example, alive, dead is a story value, as are love, hate, freedom, slavery, truth, lie, courage, cowardice, loyalty, betrayal, wisdom, stupidity, strength, weakness, excitement, boredom, and so on. All such binary qualities of experience that can reverse their charge at any moment are story values. Imagine that outside your window is 1980s East Africa, a realm of drought. Now we have a value at stake: survival, life, death. We begin at the negative. This terrible famine is taking lives by the thousands. If then it should rain, a monsoon that brings the earth back to green, animals to pasture, and people to survival, this rain would be deeply meaningful because it switches the value from negative to positive, from death to life. However, as powerful as this event would be, it still does not qualify as a story event because it happened by coincidence. Rain finally fell in East Africa. Although there's a place for coincidence in storytelling, a story cannot be built out of nothing but accidental events, no matter how charged with value. A story event creates meaningful change in the life situation of a character that is expressed and experienced in terms of a value and achieved through conflict. Again, a world of drought. Into it comes a man who imagines himself a rainmaker. This character has deep inner conflict between his passionate belief that he can bring rain, although he has never been able to do it, and his terrible fear that he's a fool or mad. He meets a woman, falls in love, then suffers as she tries to believe in him, but turns away, convinced he's a charlatan or worse. He has a strong conflict with society. Some follow him as if he's a messiah. Others want to stone him out of town. Lastly, he faces implacable conflict with the physical world, the hot winds, empty skies, parched earth. If this man can struggle through all his inner and personal conflicts against social and environmental forces and finally coax rain out of a cloudless sky, that storm would be majestic and sublimely meaningful. for it is change motivated through conflict. For a typical film, the writer will choose 40 to 60 story events, or, as they're commonly known, scenes. A novelist may want more than 60, a playwright rarely as many as 40. A scene is an action through conflict in more or less continuous time and space that turns the value-charged condition of a character's life on at least one value with a degree of perceptible significance. Ideally, every scene is a story event. For example, Chris and Andy are in love and live together. They wake up one morning and start to squabble. Their spat builds in the kitchen as they hurry to make breakfast. In the garage, the fight becomes nastier as they climb into their car to drive to work together. Finally, words explode into violence on the highway. Andy wrenches the car to the shoulder and jumps out, ending their relationship. This series of actions and locations creates a scene. It takes the couple from the positive, in love and together, to the negative, in hate and apart. Inside the scene is the smallest element of structure, the beat. A beat is an exchange of behavior in action-reaction. True action is physical, vocal, or mental movement that opens gaps in expectation and creates significant change. The substance of story is the gap that splits open between what a human being expects to happen when he takes an action and what really does happen. The rift between expectation and result, probability and necessity. Beat by beat, these changing behaviors shape the turning of a scene. Fine writing emphasizes reactions, beat after beat, even in the quietest, most internalized of scenes. A dynamic series of action-reaction gap, renewed action-surprising reaction gap, builds the scene to and around its turning point as reactions amaze and fascinate. Taking a closer look at the lovers' breakup scene. As the alarm goes off, Chris teases Andy, and he reacts in kind. As they dress, teasing turns to sarcasm, and they throw insults back and forth. Now in the kitchen, Chris threatens Andy with, "If I left you, baby, you'd be so miserable." But he calls her bluff with, "That's a misery I'd love." In the garage, Chris, afraid she's losing him, begs Andy to stay, but he laughs and ridicules her plea. Finally, in the speeding car, Chris doubles her fist and punches Andy. A fight, a squeal of brakes. Andy jumps out with a bloody nose, slams the door and shouts, "It's over," leaving her in shock. This scene is built around 6 beats, 6 distinctively different behaviors, 6 clear changes of action and reaction, teasing each other, followed by a give and take of insults, then threatening and daring each other, next pleading and ridiculing, and finally exchanges of violence that lead to the last beat and turning point. Andy's decision and action that ends the relationship, and Chris's dumbfounded surprise. Beats build scenes. Scenes then build the next largest movement of story design, the sequence. Every true scene turns the value-charged condition of the character's life, but from event to event, the degree of change can differ greatly. Scenes cause relatively minor, yet significant change. The capping scene of a sequence, however, delivers a more powerful, determinant change. A sequence is a series of scenes, generally 2 to 5, that culminates with greater impact than any previous scene. Scenes turn in minor, but significant ways. A series of scenes builds a sequence that turns in a moderate, more impactful way. A series of sequences builds the next largest structure, the act, a movement that turns on a major reversal in the value-charged condition of the character's life. The difference between a basic scene, a scene that climaxes a sequence, and a scene that climaxes an act, is the degree of change, or more precisely, the degree of impact that change has, for better or worse, on the character's inner life, personal relationships, fortunes in the world, or some combination of all these. An act is a series of sequences that peaks in a climactic scene which causes a major reversal of values, more powerful in its impact than any previous sequence or scene. A series of acts builds the largest structure of all, the story. A story is simply one huge master event. When you look at the value-charged situation in the life of the character at the beginning of the story, then compare it to the value charge at the end of the story, you should see the arc of the film, the great sweep of change that takes life from one condition at the opening to a changed condition at the end. This final condition, this end change, must be absolute and irreversible. A story is a series of acts that build to a last act climax or story climax, which brings about absolute and irreversible change. If you make the smallest element do its job, the deep purpose of the telling will be served. Let every phrase of dialogue or line of description either turn behavior and action or set up the conditions for change. Make your beats build scenes, scenes build sequences, sequences build acts, acts build story to its climax.